Hello and welcome to episode 42 of the Yes You Coaching podcast. My name is Anna Manning. I am your host and the owner and founder of Yes You Coaching, and I am a confidence coach for nice people. If this is your first time to the podcast, welcome, new friend. We have got loads of back episodes, so comb through those and see what you think would help you with your confidence building, because that's what we're all about here. Week by week, I'm picking apart things that get in the way of confidence building and stuff that helps. So dig into the archives, find what you need. And if you want to come and work with me individually, this episode is going out very end of April 2023. And I was going to take on 3 new clients in May, but one place is already taken. So now I'm taking 2. So if you want to do some private coaching with me on your confidence, then I will leave a link in the show notes and you can book a call to chat with me about how that would work. Second, if you have never taken the Grow Your Professional Confidence class with me, this is like the entry level, or no, maybe the podcast is the entry level. And the Grow Your Confidence class is like slightly higher than entry level. What we do in that class, and I'm doing that class, it's a free class. I always run it as a free class, and it's happening on May 11th. You can sign up, link in the show notes too. That class takes the foundational things that I talk about in this podcast, and it helps you to put them into an actionable plan that you can actually use to grow your confidence in 2023. Now, for some people, they could listen to the podcast, come to that class, create their own plan, work the plan, and never need to do any further work with me, which is amazing. If that's you, or if you do come and work with me, or you've already worked with me, shout out to all my current clients and ex-clients listening to this podcast, because I know you're doing it. One client told me she listens to me on 1.75 speed. So I might just talk really fast for her and see how that goes. You are welcome. You are welcome in that Grow Your Professional Confidence class. I want to tell people, I want to shout it from the rooftops. There is stuff you are doing right now, which will be having a negative impact, which will be eroding your confidence. And there is stuff that you could be doing right now, which would definitely have a positive effect on growing it. And all of that stuff that I talk about is the internal stuff, the stuff that's actually in your control, the stuff that you can actually do something about. So that is a 60-minute class. Go in the show notes now, click on the link and book your place to join us. I think we've already got over 40 people coming, so it's going to be good. All right, on with the episode. This week, you can probably already tell from this intro, actually. This week, I feel like got a bit of a rant coming on, so buckle up, buttercup, because I've been thinking all week about this concept of the double standard, and it keeps coming up with clients that I'm coaching, and it keeps coming up in my mind, and I'm like, right, I have to do a podcast about this, because I've got double standards sometimes. You've got double standards. Hell, all of us have some double standards that for the most part, we probably don't even recognize. And the double standards that I'm talking about are double standards in terms of how we treat ourselves versus how we treat other people. We have one standard for the way we expect ourselves to treat other people, and we have quite another standard for how we expect ourselves to be treated by us, like how we treat ourselves. We have a double standard in relation to that. When we think about what we expect for ourselves, for our output, for our results, we expect usually more from ourselves than we do from other people. There's another double standard. Imagine the amount that you could acknowledge a friend for, or somebody you know. You'd be able to give me loads of good things about them, all the things they do, their strengths, who they are, etc. And if I asked you, you'd probably look at me blankly, because we're used to kind of seeing the good in other people. we're not that used to doing it in ourselves. There's another double standard. And this is double trouble because when we're applying those double standards to ourselves, we're always getting the raw end of the bloody deal. Other people are getting fair, equitable, and reasonable treatment, and we're getting the real shitty end of the stick. I'll have to mark this as an explicit podcast now. Never mind. I went in the I didn't get a paper dictionary out, but I looked in the Oxford English Dictionary online for double standard. And it said a rule or principle which is unfairly applied in different ways to different people or groups. Now, if I had 5 minutes to sit down with you, I bet I could ferret out like 5 or 6 double standards, rules or principles which you are currently unfairly applying in different ways to different people or groups. And we're going to shove you in there as well, right? This isn't about having double standards for gingers and brunettes. This is having double standards for you and the people all around you. And one of the aspects that I want to look at this from is double standards around leadership. Now, most people, I don't know. You tell me, do you lead and manage other people? Most of the people that I work with individually do, but maybe not everyone listening to the podcast does. But I want you to think of it from this perspective. How often, if you're a leader, are you treating somebody respectfully, fairly, with support, with encouragement? You're setting appropriate standards, you're acknowledging what they do, you're seeing the positives, you're giving them feedback. And the picture for you is completely and utterly the opposite. The double standard abounds when we're thinking about leadership and management. And possibly part of the reason for this is because we're taught, even all the way through our lives, right? We're taught as kids to treat others the way we want to be treated. Be kind, be generous, be supportive, right? And we learn these messages pretty well. So for most of us, all right, some people are pretty horrendous to other people, granted. But I'm guessing that you're, nice enough. I'm guessing that you're doing your best in terms of how you treat other people, because probably you've internalized all those messages about how that's a good idea and we treat each other kindly and we treat each other with respect. And that's how we do things. That is our standard for ourselves. But how many messages did you get growing up about how you are supposed to treat yourself? Are there nice little quippy phrases about how you're supposed to treat yourself, like there is about how you're supposed to treat everybody else? No. I'm going to have to make up all the quippy phrases so that people can put them on memes, because they don't exist. When you think about that phrase, treat others the way you want to be treated, you may do that, and that may be a beautiful thing. But do you also do this? Treat yourself the way you wish other people would treat you. Treat yourself the way you want others to treat you. That isn't the phrase. Were you taught as a kid, you deserve respect, you deserve kindness, you deserve an appropriate standard to be applied to your behavior, you deserve the positive to be acknowledged, and you deserve feedback from the voice living inside your head? No, none of us got taught that. So what did we all do? We entered the workplace years later as the people that have one standard for how they relate to people around them and for how they lead people. Quite another standard, a shitter standard for the way that they treat themselves. And then they come to me saying, you know what, I'm good at my job. I don't feel as confident as I'd like to. I'm good at my job, but I don't have the kind of belief you would think I might have. I know in theory I'm good at my job, but I feel anxious about everything. Why could that be? Why is that? What is happening? Most people come to me completely baffled about why they don't, how they feel, how confident they feel, how good they feel about their work and what they're doing doesn't seem to correspond to what they know logically to be true about their performance. And most of the time, what we find out is because they have double standards. They apply one standard to other people, which is respectful, supportive, professional, encouraging. And that helps the people around them to grow and maintain their confidence, that kind of environment. But their internal environment, the things that they say to themselves, the way that they treat themselves, the things that they expect of themselves is not quite the same kind of environment. You might describe it as a toxic workplace on the inside or a terrible culture. Now, I've talked about this on the podcast many ways, many times, and I will continue to talk about this in many different ways, many different times. Hell, I will shout it from every rooftop that I can climb onto because it is so important. Most of you now acknowledge the fact that workplace well-being is important. Resilience is important. You need all of that stuff in order to do your job. Your job is probably hard. It probably comes with challenges, stress, difficulty, emotional load. And maybe you know how to handle all the technical aspects of your job. You can do all that. But are you doing this? Are you recognizing the standards that you've created for yourself and thinking, are these fair? Are these reasonable? Would I apply this standard to anybody else? Most of the time when I'm talking to people and they are applying a standard to themselves, which is way above anything they would ever apply to anyone else, we think we're some sort of special case in terms of how we should be treated. And I know this really sounds like a rant probably already, this podcast. I hope you're still with me. Because I think you deserve to be treated well. And I think that your workplace well-being depends on it. And I think people bandy around, we need to be resilient. Yeah, but how the hell do you do that? This is how. This is how you build confident, resilient employees that weather storms and challenges and still somehow maintain some sense of well-being. You create a great environment for them to work in. You treat them with fairness, with respect. You trust them. You give them support when they're emotional. You don't put standards on them which are completely unachievable in the circumstances. You set a fair standard. You don't compare them to other people. You acknowledge the good work that they do. You give them feedback. You do all of that because you know, even if you haven't really thought about it, that it helps to build a happy place to work, that it helps to build people's confidence, that it helps to build people's self-esteem, that it helps people to take on new challenges and new tasks. It helps people to innovate and to try new things and to push your business forward or create new pathways for patients, right? Whatever it is that your people, your teams, your workplaces are doing. you know that applying those fair standards to them will help them to do that. And you also know that if you treat them like shit, they're going to struggle. They're going to struggle. They're going to struggle to turn their work out as easily. They're going to struggle because they're going to be paralyzed with fear. So they're going to procrastinate. They're going to put things off. They're going to struggle because they won't dare do new things. They won't dare try new things because they know what's coming to them if they make a mistake. They're going to struggle to innovate or be creative because you can't do that in a terrible environment. And they're just going to have an overall sense that this is probably somewhere that long term they don't really want to be. Now, if you are treating yourself, if you have these double standards that I'm talking about, and I used to massively, every single one of those double standards that I just listed, or the standards that I said were, terrible for anyone in a workplace, I had those going on inside. I had to systematically root out and destroy. I did it in a kind of way than that, but it took a lot of work, and systematically I had to go through and do that. And now I do that with other people. So it's not so much work for them because I know how to lead them through it. But hear this today. If you have a double standard around yourself versus around the people that you work with or that you lead, ask yourself, what is that doing to me? What happens to me when that standard is applied to me? When a hell of a lot is expected of me, this is by me, by the way, but I don't really get anything good in return. I never really get any praise. I never really get acknowledged by me for anything that I do. Oh, yeah, sure. I get myself pointing out all the flaws and all the negatives and all the stuff that I've done wrong. I get reminded about that stuff. Do I get reminded of anything good? No. I get compared to other people negatively. I get really high standards applied to me. I get told, you need to do this perfectly. You're going to fail. You're rubbish. I know this feels like a bit of a Debbie Downer, guys, but stay with me. I get criticized by me. I doubt myself, my capabilities, and my skills all the bloody time. So, how is that for me? What happens to me when I work in an environment that has very high standards, very low levels of respect, very low levels of trust, and little to no acknowledgement? What happens to me? If you were working in that environment, you'd hate it and you'd want to leave. But if you've got real double standards around how you're treating yourself and how you're treating other people, guess what? You're already working in that environment. And you can't even leave. You can't even leave and go somewhere else because you're taking that environment right with you. When you leave jobs, you can get a new boss, but your double standards coming with you. When you get a promotion, everything can sound great, but your double standards are coming with you. If you move industries, great, but your double standards are coming with you. If you quit work completely and do something else, guess what? Your double standards are still coming with you. Now, I do not want that for you. And I'm guessing that you do not really want that for you either. I'm guessing you don't want to work somewhere where one standard is applied to everybody else and one standard is applies to you and you get the shitty end of the stick. But in order to do something about it, you've got to get real about what your double standards are. You've got to get real about where you're actually applying one standard to other people, which is fair and reasonable and equitable, and one standard to you, which is quite the opposite. When I coach people who work in healthcare, we often end up talking about culture because they're all about culture in healthcare. Probably because so much of their culture has been so unbelievably terrible that a lot of people talk about how culture is very important. And maybe in your industry too, even if you're not in healthcare, you might think about how important your culture is. And we always end up talking about culture. And we talk about how the kind of culture that you want to work in and the kind of culture that you have on the inside. And we find a lot of double standards there. So my clients tell me, I want to work in a culture where I don't get blamed when there's a mistake, but instead we sit down and we look at the system. We think about what went wrong and how can we put steps in place to prevent that from happening again, but we do not blame and we do not shame. And what does their internal culture looks like? Their internal culture, the voice inside their head said, you made a mistake, you piece of crap. This proves that you're rubbish at your job and you shouldn't be here. You're a failure. And that voice tells them that for what? 3 days, 3 weeks, and the rest, one of my clients said when I suggested that time frame to them. 3 months, 3 years. Total double standard. But all is not lost, my friends. Once you learn to spot where your double standards are, you get to decide, what do I actually want the standards to be for me from inside me? What do I actually want? What would I actually choose? What would help me to thrive? What would help me to do the best that I could possibly do? What would just make my life easier? You get to decide. And once you decide, you get to go about changing those double standards until you finally have the standards for yourself that you have for other people. I can tell you, hand on heart, that for the most part, is it perfect? No. But it's pretty darn close. I have the same standards of myself that I have for other people. I don't give myself that much of a hard time anymore. I don't compare myself. I'm supportive, I'm encouraging, I'm not critical, I'm not full of doubt. I trust myself wherever possible. And guess what? Whenever I notice that I'm applying a standard which just isn't fair, I'm like, come on, this isn't fair. This isn't fair. If I'm looking at somebody else whose business is doing X, Y, and Z, and they've 10 years ahead of me, and I'm looking at it thinking, oh God, look at me. What am I doing over here? I'll pull myself up and I'll be like, wait a minute. That isn't fair. Your business has been going full time for 1 year. And you know what? It's going well. So you can, if you decide that you have had enough of your own double standards, you can decide that actually you just don't want to apply them anymore. And that is the first step. And I pray to God that you think you are worthy of an acceptable standard of care and attention and a level of respect and trust like any other human being. I pray to God that you think you are worthy of that because I know for a fact that you are. Absolutely, you are. So I think that's my rant about double standards over. We need to tell everyone about this, guys. So many people just have no clue. They've never even thought to question that the way they're treating themselves might be having a detrimental impact on them. It's just so much part of the white noise that's been going on since we were kids that we don't even hear it. But it's happening and it is having an impact. And if you are someone who wants to grow your confidence, and I'm guessing you do because you're listening to this podcast, then this work to look at your double standards and to choose something different is going to help you. It will have good returns. I promise. I've seen it over and over and over again. And if you want to come and do this with me, I have that free class that I told you about at the beginning in May 11th. I'm going to lead you through every double standard you may possibly have. And I'm going to help you develop your own plan for how you want to set your standards and lead you through an exercise so that you can make a decision about it, you can write it up, and you know what that standard from now on, from May 11th onwards, is going to be. That is the start of the journey. If you think anyone else needs this kind of help, God, it's all of us really, isn't it? Then send them the link to the class too and have them sign up. I'd love to have as many people there as possible because I gotta share this stuff. I can't keep it in. All right. I hope you enjoyed that episode and it wasn't too ranty for you. I will see you next week when we're going to have an interview with one of my old clients. Fabulous woman. So I'm looking forward to interviewing her and we'll have that on the podcast next week. So until then, adios.